Hello and welcome everybody to another webinar, which I think have been going really, it's amazing the information that we're providing, and we're looking to do more of these webinars. So let me start out by saying thank you for taking time out of your day. Today is going to be really a good session on how to plan your retirement withdrawal strategy. And this will give you some really good ideas. Our presenters are Samantha Macy, who is soon to be a CFP. She's passed all of her tests and took the comprehensive test. And in May, formally, she will be a certified financial planner because that's when her experience will come in. And Nicole Goebel, who's a CPA, both are two of our wealth advisors. And they put together what I think is really a great presentation. Before we get started, though, let me just talk a little bit about the volatility in the markets. Today is a big day because we are waiting for the Federal Reserve Open Market Committee to come in and kind of tell us what they plan on doing with interest rates. We know, I can assure you, interest rates are going up. The question is, will it be 0.5%, 0.75%, or 1%? We feel that 0.75% is baked into the cake. And if we get anything different than that, we should see some volatility. It'll be really interesting to see what Jerome Powell, the Federal Reserve Chair, comes out and says with regards to their outlook on inflation. Everything right now is about inflation. And as I say to you, as often as I can say to you, inflation is a moving target. That means that the Fed will be changing their strategy with every new report they have on the economy. So today, all eyes will be focused at 2 o'clock to see what direction interest rates will go in and really what kind of wording will they use to define inflation. So stay tuned. I will be sending out some communication on this in the next couple days. In the meantime, without any further ado, I'd like to kick off the webinar. And once again, I thank you for taking part in it. So at this time, I'd like to have Samantha Macy start us off.
Hello, everyone. I'm Samantha, one of the Associate Wealth Advisors here at Boucher. I am very excited to be here with you today. Nicole and I have prepared a lot of really important information we feel for you. And today we're going to be discussing which accounts you should draw from first, avoiding unnecessary income tax and penalties, how much you should withdraw from your accounts, and how to sustain distributions through market volatility. So we're going to start off today's conversation with talking about cash flow planning. And really, as we start to formulate a retirement withdrawal strategy, cash flow planning comes into play to get a well-rounded picture of what your cash flow is as one of our clients. As you start to think about your cash flows, what we first want to point out is that it's important to understand your budget. What are your expense needs? What is your monthly budget and your expense on an annual basis as well? And once you have an understanding of that, the second piece to it is, what are your income sources? Where is your income going to come from in retirement? And over here on the left, you can see we have some examples of the typical inflows of income during retirement years. Some people have decided in their retirement to work part-time, so they have part-time employment income. Others will have pensions or rental income and Social Security benefits. So we really just want to get your gears turning in terms of where is your income coming from and how much do you have coming in. One of the main sources of income that I wanted to highlight today are pension elections. And we get a lot of questions surrounding pension elections from our clients, so we thought this would be a really important topic to hit today. In the long term, your pension election will affect your withdrawal strategy. And the main question that we'll get is, should I take a lump sum or an annuity payment, which is a monthly pension payment for their pension election? So I thought we'd today walk through some of the pros and cons of each and give you kind of a broad understanding of our conversation around this when that time comes for you or as an ongoing conversation for you. So for a pension lump sum, one of the positives of selecting such would be greater flexibility. You'll have the flexibility to take that lump sum amount that you get at the time of retirement and invest it. And then once you invest it, you're able to take withdrawals from it when it is needed for you in your particular circumstance. And that includes one-off larger distributions that you wouldn't really have the freedom and flexibility to do so if you were just receiving those monthly pension payments. Another pro is future growth to combat inflation. As you invest these funds, you'd be able to make sure your funds are keeping pace with inflation or maybe outpacing to make sure that you're sustaining your lifestyle in retirement. Next, legacy planning. And this kind of ties into our flexibility conversation. When you're planning to leave your lump sum as it's grown to a beneficiary, you have that flexibility, you have that freedom to leave it to your desired beneficiary. In contrast, when you select a annuity payment or a monthly pension payment, those usually stop coming in once you've passed. So you're not going to have that option to leave that to a beneficiary unless you've been saving as you receive them throughout the years. Some cons for receiving a lump sum would be market risk. As you invest your funds, that is a natural side effect to be invested in the stock market. So the account value could be going up and down as we go through seasons of volatility. Another con, potentially you could fully deplete the account if your spending is not controlled. But as your advisor, this is where we would step in and make sure that you are making the appropriate selection for your circumstances and at the appropriate distribution rate, which we'll talk about later in more detail. On the flip side, annuity payments. This is another type of selection you can make for your pension. The pros, less market risk to you, and a guaranteed fixed income for life. One of the major cons, though, would be company risk. And when I say that, I'm really talking about people that are receiving pensions through private companies, not those that are teachers or government employees receiving their pensions through those organizations. Instead, if you're receiving your pension through a private company and that company goes under, you run the risk of those pension payments ceasing from coming in. Another important point is that most pensions do not have a cost of living adjustment to them, so they're not keeping pace with inflation. As we continue to work with our clients through deciding pension versus lump sum or annuity, another item that often comes up is what type of annuity should I select? And we'll have a conversation around, do you want the monthly pension payment to last for your lifetime, maybe for a guaranteed term, or a percentage going to your survivor? So these are all important considerations as we talk about income planning sources. And another item that I wanted to highlight today is Social Security. Now, this is obviously a very important one because it affects all of us. And when you're thinking about your Social Security benefit, we want you to consider a couple of items. The first is when to elect Social Security, and the second is how much is taxable to you. And I have just some foundational concepts of Social Security here that we'll go over. The first is up to 85% can be taxable of your benefit. Secondly, at full retirement age, your earnings will not affect your benefit amount. However, if you're making earnings before full retirement age and you're collecting your benefit amount can decrease if beyond a certain threshold. And you can see the 2022 amount is listed out there. In addition, each year you delay your benefit, it grows by 8%. And there are very few places in the market where we can guarantee an 8% increase. So one strategy that we're often recommending is to delay taking your benefit as long as you can that works for your financial plan and your cash flow need. And the longest that you can delay is out to age 70. Another strategy, if you're married, is considering having the higher paid spouse delay until age 70. This is particularly beneficial for a couple that may not be comfortable with both of you delaying until age 70. So maybe having the spouse that made a little bit less throughout their career, taking it earlier, and the higher paying spouse delaying to really maximize that benefit for you. So we've talked about different types of income from different sources, and the next part of this presentation I want to talk about is what is it going to look like if you are taking from your portfolio, from your investment portfolio, and the types of accounts that you're going to see if you're taking from there. So I've got it broken out into the three categories here. And the first one is taxable, so taxable accounts. These types of accounts allow you to deposit funds and buy and sell investments within those funds. They are also one of the most flexible types of accounts. You're able to take withdrawals from these types of accounts without the restrictions and early withdrawal penalties you'll experience with these other two types. However, you will have taxes on your interest, dividends, and capital gains. Tax deferred accounts are when you are deferring your compensation into a retirement account. And you can see we have these account examples listed out down here below. The most common types of your tax deferred accounts would be employer retirement plans, 401ks, and 403bs. And all of these distributions are taxed as ordinary income unless there is after-tax basis in the account. And then lastly, we have tax-free accounts. These types of accounts you contribute to with after-tax earned income, and they go into a Roth account. And you can see we have the two types here, a Roth IRA and a Roth employer plan. And these can be very advantageous for you because the distributions and the earnings are tax-free after age 59 and a half, and the account is open for 5 years. One item I wanted to point out before moving on from this that we're seeing more and more is that there are employer retirement plans, for example, 401k plan, that offer now a Roth contribution component to it. So you actually have the opportunity to start contributing a percentage to the Roth and pre-tax buckets of those plans. And one nuance that many people aren't aware of are that any employer contributions that go into the plan will always go in pre-tax. So even if you're making 100% Roth contributions to your plan, the employer match will go in pre-tax and you're continuing to fill up both sides of that plan. So now that I've talked about the types of accounts, I'm going to pass it over to Nicole, who's going to talk about which type of account to draw from first in retirement and some other income tax planning items that are very important for retirement.
Thanks so much, Sam. I'm Nicole Goebel, CPA and Wealth Advisor here at Boucher Financial Group. So as Sam mentioned, now that we've talked about the different types of account you might have within your investment portfolio, what things should you consider when determining where to draw from first and how much? So one of the big components is what age are you retiring? So we have some clients who retire as early as in their 50s, early 50s. So certainly most retirement accounts do not allow you to withdraw without penalties until age 59 and a half. So that's certainly a consideration. Also, again, Social Security is not available until the earliest age 62. So at what age you're retiring determines what funds you have access to. Now, I have on the right here a couple items that are exceptions to this rule. Rule 72T, we work with clients who need early withdrawals from their retirement accounts. Many 401k plans allow you to begin taking withdrawals at age 55 versus 59 and a half. And also utilizing Roth IRAs, where your contributions can come out tax-free, and after 5 years, the earnings, again, that might be another place to review taking from if you're retiring earlier than, say, a normal retirement age. And then the next two components on the left, account balances and taxability of accounts, really work hand in hand. So we often have clients come to us that have put the majority of their funds into that tax deferred bucket, right? For many years, they have been deferring as much as possible into their retirement plans. That's where their employer match has gone. So that is really the majority of their savings for retirement. But if they've also been fortunate enough to fill up some of the taxable or after-tax bucket, it's really a matter of looking at a mix of distributions from those buckets. I've often worked with clients who've made the mistake of spending down their taxable assets first because they're in a nice position where they're only paying tax on interest, dividends, and capital gains and allowing their retirement accounts to grow. But then when they need to go to those accounts or take required minimum distributions, they're in a much higher tax bracket than necessary. So it's important to work with your advisor to determine what's that right mix of assets. I often recommend that clients start taking advantage of state retirement exclusions as early as possible. So in New York State, if you're over 59 and a half, you can take $20,000 of retirement income tax-free. So again, even if you don't need to start taking from your account, you're not yet RMD, required minimum distribution age, right? Taking that $20,000 out to supplement income, even if it's just reinvested back into an account, makes sense, because later on when you need to take more than that out of your account, the full amount would be taxable. And also certainly keeping in mind things like planning around Medicare premiums. So finding that correct mix so you're not entering that next tax bracket and unnecessarily having to pay higher costs. And then last but not least, how are your accounts invested, right? So we work a lot with clients to make sure that the right type of investments are in each type of account. But say, for example, you have a mix of stocks and bonds. Obviously, this year we've seen volatility and downturn in both markets, but looking at where in a downturn you might withdraw funds from at not as high of a discount, and the reverse as well. If you've seen some significant growth in your account, maybe taking from that growth in the account first. So again, these are items that we work with each of our clients on. So we've talked about kind of the general theme of items to consider when you're choosing which of your accounts to pull from and what amounts. But once you reach 72, you're forced to start taking required minimum distributions. Now, there is the possibility they may extend this age with some upcoming legislature, but bottom line is all of your pre-tax retirement accounts listed here on the left, all your IRAs, retirement plans through employers, even inherited IRAs prior to 2020 are subject to this rule. And it's a calculation that you do based on your age and the account balance to determine that amount. One highlight, Roth IRAs are not subject to required minimum distributions. This is important because Roth 401ks are subject to RMD. So it is absolutely a reason for you to roll over any Roth balance from your employer plan to a Roth IRA so you're not forced to take withdrawals unnecessarily. There are some nuances to this rule. So if you're still working and you don't own more than 5% of the company that you're working at, you won't be forced to take RMDs until you retire. And the first year you can delay until up to April 1st of the following year, but then you'd be forced to take double in that year. That makes sense if, for example, you're working full-time now, but you're 72 and you're looking to retire next year and will be in a much lower tax bracket. Most importantly, don't forget to take it. The penalty is 50% of the amount that is not withdrawn if you do not take your withdrawal. Now, something we work with our clients on annually, our client service team is amazing and keeps all of the advisors in check here to make sure that each of our clients take their required minimum distribution each year and any appropriate tax withholding. So what if you're in a situation where you're forced to take a required minimum distribution, but you don't necessarily need it for cash flow purposes? So you're paying that income tax unnecessarily. One strategy to utilize if you're charitably inclined is qualified charitable distributions. A QCD allows you to take up to $100,000 per year per person. We don't have many people who would do this, but certainly any portion of your required minimum distribution and donate it directly to a 501c3 charity. So for example, you can give us a list of the larger donations you make, and the custodian, in our case, Charles Schwab, can send that check directly to that charitable organization. What's the advantage to you? That amount is excluded from your federal taxable income, and you also get that benefit in some states, including New York. So you're not paying tax on the amount that was withdrawn from your account that you were going to be forced to take anyway, but that goes directly to a charity. It is more advantageous than just taking that charitable deduction for two reasons. One, most people don't itemize any longer with the larger standard deduction and the cap on state and local income taxes. And also, this reduces what's called your adjusted gross income. And that number goes into calculations for the amount of Social Security that's taxable, your Medicare premiums. So it is a better tax benefit than just taking that deduction. Couple keys, only your IRAs are allowed to use QCDs. So basically your employer retirement plans do not allow for this strategy. And you do need to manually adjust the amount on your tax form. So please speak with us and your tax preparer to make sure that's done appropriately. Another item that Sam mentioned when talking about pensions earlier was legacy planning. So this is Also, a question we often get from clients is, what are the best accounts that I can spend down during my lifetime if I'm really interested in leaving my heirs with something that is the best benefit to them? So rules changed in 2020 with the Secure Act around inherited assets such as IRAs and Roth IRAs. So a great option is to have after-tax money left over or taxable accounts, because those accounts receive a full step up in cost basis as of the date of your passing. So basically any built-in capital gains are negated and that person receives that and could potentially liquidate it immediately with no gains and have access to that full amount. So that's a great option. Tax deferred, a little bit more difficult because again, those balances are subject to ordinary income. And with the new rules, you either have a 5-year payout if it's just going through your estate, or if there's a named beneficiary, up to 10 years after the person's passing. And we're talking about non-spousal beneficiaries here. So if you're married, we're assuming that both of you have passed because it's legacy planning. One item just to mention is non-qualified annuities, right? So that's after-tax money that has gone into an annuity are treated differently. So although the growth on those accounts is tax deferred, they aren't great to leave to beneficiaries because they will either be forced to take them out in 5 years or to keep it within an annuity wrapper long-term. And last is tax-free. And again, that's a great option. So we tend to not spend down Roths during your lifetime if we don't need to. Again, if there is a desire for you to leave money to your heirs, that's a great way to do it. They do need to take those amounts out of the account, that Roth IRA wrapper, but there's no taxes on the withdrawal. So again, the first and third bucket are certainly great to leave to heirs. The second one needs some planning. Now I'll turn it over to Sam, who's going to talk a little bit more about how to sustain distributions, especially in these volatile times.
Thanks, Nicole. So when we're determining a sustainable strategy for your retirement, we want to include all of these concepts that we were talking about today, from cash flow planning to income tax strategies, and apply them to our best practices. So let's answer the question, how can I avoid running out of money? And our first best practice that we use for all of our clients is the golden rule of the 4% distribution rule. And what this does is seeks to establish steady and safe income throughout your retirement. How we calculate this is we look at your entirety of your investment portfolio and we take 4% of that and say, this is the amount we can safely distribute on an annual basis. And we'll distribute that however, whatever frequency you want throughout the year, whether that's a monthly check or if that's twice a month. But we work with you to determine what works for you as long as it stays within that 4% distribution rule. Now, there are some people that believe that a 3% more conservative rate all the way up to a 6% rate, which would be a slightly more aggressive rate than 4%, is appropriate. So we kind of fall right there in the middle with the 4% distribution rule. And I would say one thing to keep in mind is this isn't a hard and fast rule. It's actually part of a larger conversation of what fits your financial plan, what fits your financial goals. We do have some clients that say, I don't want to leave anything to my heirs. I would prefer to spend down the entirety of my accounts in my lifetime and pass away with my last dollar. And that person would perhaps have a higher distribution rate, maybe closer to 5.5%. And on the flip side, we'll have people that want to leave money to their beneficiaries, and they might have a more conservative rate because they didn't need the income during their retirement years, and they're saving it for their children, for their legacy planning. We also have situations as we have conversations about deferring Social Security. If we're recommending you defer until age 70, but you need some additional income from your portfolio, you might have a higher distribution rate in your earlier years of retirement, and then we'll decrease it for your later years once you're taking your Social Security benefit. Another best practice is to work with your advisor to find the appropriate distribution mix. And what we're talking about here is which types of accounts you should be drawing from. And as Nicole was talking about earlier, it really is a complex conversation, and we are heavily involved in making sure that you're making the right tactical distributions from your portfolio overall. We also recommend reinvesting any excess RMDs And when we say that, what we mean is when you turn 72 and you start taking your required minimum distributions, if you realize that you have more income coming into you than you actually need for your expenses, consider reinvesting those funds and putting your money to work for you. And lastly, work with your advisor to create a long-term financial plan with conservative return and inflation assumptions. I know at our firm, what we've done is we've reached out to other advisors at other firms and done our own research and come up with some very conservative assumptions for all of our financial plans. And over here on the right, I have an example of a total income analysis that we've used our software to produce. And it just gives you an example of our thought process as we work with you in determining your withdrawal rate. So this orange line is your goals, your financial goals and your needs in retirement. And you can see that we're using different buckets of income to reach those goals between Social Security, RMDs, post-retirement income, maybe that's a pension, and then we're making up the difference with the investment income from your portfolio. Next, we're going to talk about how can I withstand market downturns? And this is obviously a topic that's very top of mind for our clients, and rightly so. We've been going through a period of volatility. And the first thing that I would say is to remember that you need to keep a long-term investor perspective. And a lot of our clients believe or have this thought in their head that once they retire, they need to become much more conservative with their funds because they're protecting what they've been saving for all those years. But in actuality, you need to remember that when you retire, you have 20 to 30 more years that you need to keep your growth to sustain your lifestyle and keep the longevity of your plan in a healthy place. So I would recommend to you to stay the course, to not make any knee-jerk reactions and choose to sell out of positions at a low because of market volatility and hurt your portfolio because you're not allowing it to rebound when the market will ultimately rebound and have that growth when the market returns to normals. This goes in hand with our next point here. You need to have the appropriate portfolio allocation for you. And this is really a three-part conversation. First, we need to understand what's the longevity of your plan? How many years do we need your plan to last? Next, we need to understand how much growth do you need in your portfolio? Do you need to have a higher rate of return because you need more funds than somebody else? And so you may be in a slightly more aggressive portfolio. And lastly, what's your risk appetite? Are you comfortable taking on higher levels of risk, or do you feel that you need to be more conservative to be able to sleep at night? These are all very important variables, and we want to make sure that we're involving you in that decision. Most of our retirees are in our growth and income portfolio, which is 60% equities, 40% fixed income and alternatives. And there's actually an example of this over here on the right. However, we do have some retirees that are 100% in the stock market. And we're okay with that as long as they feel that they can handle that as well. Because when volatility does happen, their portfolio is going to be down more or up more when times are good, because they're going to have wider swings based on how they're allocated. One way that we do mitigate this a bit is we have a cash distribution strategy for all of our retirees. We first determine what is the monthly distribution that you're going to need from your account, and then we set aside 2 years worth of these funds in our conservative strategy. What this does is protect you during times of volatility. So when there are downturns, we're not needing to sell out of anything at lows and realize that loss. In actuality, we're just taking from this distribution strategy. And once the portfolio and the market go back to norms and maybe highs, we'll be filling up that strategy again, preparing for the next time that there's volatility. Another strategy that we would recommend to you is to wait to take one-off large distributions until the market recovers. Again, what we really want to do is preserve our portfolio and allow it the time to return to its previous highs. So we want to make sure that we're set up for when the market rebounds and allow our stocks to be in the right positions. So that's why we're recommending maybe hold off a few months, see if the market's in a better place before you take a one-off distribution, maybe for that home improvement project you've been waiting on or purchasing another car. If you can wait a few months, that would be something that we would recommend to you. And lastly, kind of going in tandem with this, utilizing long-term low-cost debt when appropriate. If you are going to be purchasing a new car or a second home, maybe consider financing part of it or financing it for now and consider paying it off later. Spreading out the cost of a second home over a 30-year mortgage rather than paying for it in full right now is a more responsible option based on how we are waiting for the portfolios to rebound at this time. So that's just another strong recommendation we would have for you. And of course, we'd be happy to discuss this at any point if this is something that you find relevant to you or you do have any questions. So I know today we've talked about a lot of different concepts, and I'm going to hand it back to Nicole, who's going to just review some of our key takeaways.
Thanks, Samantha. In summary today, again, we've talked about a lot of the cash flow planning, income tax planning, and investment planning around creating your withdrawal strategy. So what are the important items to take with you from today's webinar? Make sure you work with your advisor to draw from the right accounts, to apply the income tax planning recommendations, and ensure that you're taking your required minimum distributions. Again, there's a hefty penalty there. So we would love to work with you one-on-one on any of these items. Start planning ahead. So we do have many clients come to us that are on the verge of retirement, but we love also working with people who are planning well in advance. Then we can give you guidance on not only where to start taking funds from, but also how to fill up those different buckets more appropriately for the long-term plan. And following our best practices, as Samantha said, we are very open and honest with our clients. We let them know if we feel that they are taking an appropriate amount from their portfolio that they can sustain long-term in making their pension or Social Security elections. But again, we will let someone know if they're either taking too much and we're concerned, or if they're taking too little and we feel that they're being too conservative and we want them to better enjoy what they've saved for their lifetimes. So thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking time to be with us. We would be happy to answer any specific questions. So please give us a call at 518-720-3333 with any specific questions. Many of our clients have engaged us for this type of planning already, but if you haven't, please feel free to reach out to any of our team members and we'd be happy to work with you.